Would our county clerk please call the roll?
Mark Johnson. Randall Martin.
Here.
Catherine Metzger.
Present.
Scott Murphy.
Here.
Eric Rankin.
Present.
Carla Robustelli. Susan Schaefer.
Here.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Here.
Paul Segabiano.
Here.
David Seltzer.
Here.
James Selner.
Here.
George Wendt.
Present.
Lori Wolrab.
Here.
Josh Barnett.
Present.
Jacob Beard.
Present.
William Casely.
Here.
Don Cavallini.
Here.
Chuck Erickson.
Here.
George Gordon.
Present.
John McIntyre.
Here, we have 19 members present, 1 absent. We do have a quorum. We'll move on to item number 5 on our agenda, appearance by members of the public and county employees. We have 3 members of the public that would like to speak today. They're going to speak pertaining to item 7A1A in your packet. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ms. Michelle Hunt.
Good morning, board members. My name is Michelle Hunt. I'm a McLean County resident, and I'd like to talk to you this morning about the proposed 12-year TIF extension in Uptown Normal. A TIF, or tax increment financing district, as you know, is a funding mechanism granted by the state to municipalities meant to revitalize blighted areas. To form a TIF, the town of Normal only had to inform other taxing bodies of it, not seek approval. However, the state legislature wants to know that all the other taxing bodies support extending a TIF before granting that extension. Now, why is that? Because 23 years is a really long time in the life of property, and it should be more than enough time to revitalize an area. The way a TIF is often sold is as a win-win for the municipality and for all taxing bodies, because a blighted area isn't generating much property tax for anyone. But after 23 years of investing the full increase of those property taxes back into the parcel, those taxing bodies should get to reap the benefits of the TIF development by becoming a recipient of those taxes. But that's only guaranteed to happen when a TIF is ended. The promise of the TIF was that in the end, McLean County will be getting a higher share of property taxes than we ever could have without the TIF's creation. The county should start collecting those taxes from TIF properties in 2026 or earlier, while the properties are still in peak condition, at the point of their maximum assessed valuation. The town of Normal says in its proposal that the county and taxing bodies will get a 100% surplus on all but the few properties they've highlighted for redevelopment. However, half of this TIF is largely owned by the town, south of the tracks, and hasn't been redeveloped yet. The town talks about Uptown South in their Uptown 2.0 plan, and may cut half of that Uptown TIF out to begin a new 23-year TIF district there, in order to better incentivize redevelopment agreements. Fewer parcels in the original TIF will mean a smaller surplus for the taxing bodies. You wouldn't derive a surplus from those properties once redeveloped because they would be part of a different TIF. Things may work out the way the town of Normal is proposing, but if you pass this TIF extension, we'll all be left hanging to find that out, because it will give the town complete control of these property taxes until 2038. We'll be left to hope that no further changes happen to the TIF that change the outcome we've been promised. Or we could agree that 23 years is long enough to invest the county's money elsewhere and allow the town to use some of its own tools, excuse me, to incentivize further development. This option gives elected county officials final say in what happens with our portion of the tax. Is handing over this kind of taxing power really a stable, lasting policy, or is it a gamble? You might be comfortable with this plan based on who you're dealing with today, but who's going to be at the table 8 or 20 years from now? There's no guarantee that the TIF you're expecting a surplus from will be the same TIF in the future. We're dealing with an over $1 million deficit this year. The county government has already seen over 20 employees take early retirement. And you've overseen frozen pay for county employees, for county elected officials, and for yourselves. These are reflections of a current, ongoing budgetary crisis. So it begs the question of why McLean County and other taxing bodies would approve an extension on this TIF when we're already struggling to make ends meet for the county. Does taking this risk make sense in the face of our current budget issues? No, it does not. Please vote down the agreement for extension of this TIF It may make sense for the town of Normal, but for McLean County residents and government, it's a losing proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone that there's a 3-minute limit for speaking. Mr. Adam Heenan is next. Adam, there is a clock on the, it's right over there too, right over on that big screen if you want to see it.
Oh, that's good too.
Thank you.
All right, I won't even touch with this. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Heenan, and I'm a recent transplant to McLean County from Chicago. And I just wanted to take a moment this morning, considering this bill that's coming forth, to speak about our experience in Chicago and what happened when we had more and more TIF extensions. In Chicago in 2011, when Mayor Rahm Emanuel came into office, he kind of picked a fight with teachers. And we know this, he was very out there about it in the news, about saying, we don't have the money and we're going to prevent you from striking. And there was a mass public education around the question of where is the money? And the answer always came back to, it's in the TIF. And this is the kind of question that I think this board is going to have to answer if the extension, is passed. I think you're going to have to start to understand that when TIFs were created, they were made to be temporary redevelopment tools, not made to be extended indefinitely. And when you start to see municipal workers impacted by the lack of dollars, by the bodies that employ them to say, we don't have the money anymore, then they're faced with a choice. They're faced with either asking more taxpayers to front more of the bill, upfront, homeowners, elsewhere, or they're faced with leaving. Either way, you see a drain in money that would otherwise go into natural redevelopment or organic redevelopment in the community. So I think that this is the lesson that I wanted to bring to you all as somebody who's lived through it, that there is risks associated with passing indefinite or extensions on TIFs when the public is kind of unaware or a little bit behind the scenes about what on the receiving end of what happens. I think that too, I'd like to point out that, when we use these tools for redevelopment, if we do not do them carefully, those who are most vulnerable in these communities are at risk of losing their homes. So we're also talking about community pushout. Community pushout that would ultimately be if there were other reinvestment tools used or others incentives for staying, people who would be entrepreneurs. I'd like to point to the town of Normal for recently passing, I want to thank them for recently passing the Sanctuary City ordinance. I think that this is an example of a different kind of tool where families feel welcome in this community, where they can start their own businesses. I think that this is something that, the reason that my partner and I work in Peoria, but we moved here because this was a place where we could feel like we'd be welcome and start something awesome. So thank you all, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. Our last speaker today is Mr. Joel Thorson.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joel Thorson. I promise to make this quick, too, because I have to get back to work. I am not an urban planner. Before this week, I didn't know much about how TIF districts work or what they were supposed to accomplish, but my understanding now that I've looked into the issue is that they're meant to fix a problem, that they're meant to address blight or out-of-control vacancy rates, or the fact that there is not a service nearby like housing. And once again, I'm not an urban planner. I don't intend to use technical jargon today. But as someone who is not involved in that sort of profession, I would not consider Uptown Normal to be blighted, nor would I look at the housing that is there and consider it to be affordable to someone like me, who is young, who has student loans, and is already working 2 jobs in order to actually make it by. Nor do I know of a guarantee that this is actually going to produce anything beneficial for the county. So it makes me question whether or not this is necessary, and not just that, but whether or not this is a gift to developers or something that you are actually going to be investing in the community. And so I urge you to vote no today, or at the very least to table this until you get an actual guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, consent agenda. You have it before you. What say you?
I move it be approved as presented.
Motion by member Segoviano to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? Okay. Second by member Went.
No, I want to speak,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I'm
Okay.
not seconding it.
Okay. Thank you. Let me have a second, and then we'll get it on the floor here. Second by member Rostelli. Mr. Went.
Yes, I'd like to pull item E2A from the consent agenda.
E2A, request approval of a resolution of the County Board of the County of McLean directing staff to make certain physical changes to the McLean County Nursing Home. That will go underneath the property report. Member Segoviano, E2A, and we'll bring it up on the floor at that time.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. All in favor of the consent agenda as approved and changed, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I want to point out to you that there is a transfer ordinance on page 45. To all members, please refer to 45, which requires 2/3 of our votes. Is there anyone who would like to record a dissenting vote on the transfer ordinance at this time? If not, then we'll consider it a unanimous approval. Thank you, and we'll move on now. Next will be the approval of resolutions. Congratulations. Could I please have member, Mr. Judge? Let me finish, okay? Mr. Kevin Fitzgerald, Chief Judge of the Circuit Court, please. You can correct me before I can finish what I'm saying. Come on up here at the podium, please. Thank you. Being an old teacher, I think back about people. It seems like yesterday you were graduating from high school, and we always wonder what's going to happen to everyone. Well, this gentleman turned out to do very well, and it's a congratulations to you. He had a great caring attitude and genuine concern for the foster children, and he promoted a lot of coordination among agencies as well. And so I personally want to say thank you, and we want to give you a resolution from the county as well, and I'd like to read it at this time. Whereas on May 4th, 2018, the Illinois court appointed special advocates presented Judge Kevin P. Fitzgerald with the 2018 Juvenile Court Judge of the Year Award. Congratulations to you, sir. Whereas Judge Fitzgerald has been a juvenile abuse and neglect court judge in McLean County since 2008, and whereas Judge Fitzgerald recognizes CASA volunteers to be invaluable assets who provide both information and recommendations to the McLean County Court to ensure children achieve the goal of a safe and permanent home, and whereas Judge Fitzgerald supports the McLean County CASA program by encouraging citizens to volunteer, providing presentations during training, officiating swearing-in ceremonies, and attending volunteer recognition events. And whereas Judge Fitzgerald was instrumental in McLean County's participation in a statewide data collection project, which demonstrated that McLean County foster care children move towards permanency quicker than they have when they have a CASA volunteer. Now, therefore, be resolved that this McLean County Board and the citizens of McLean County extend their wholehearted thanks to Judge Fitzgerald for his genuine concern for and committed service to the children and families in McLean County, and congratulate him on receiving the much-deserved Illinois Court Appointment Special Advocates Juvenile Judge of the Year Award. Be it further resolved that the McLean County Board hereby directs the county clerk to prepare a certified copy of this resolution to be presented to Judge Kevin P. Fitzgerald with our sincere congratulations, adopted by the McLean County Board this 15th day of May 2018. Thank you, sir, for all your service to our county. Say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We have an awesome CASA program here. It's very effective. They give us all kinds of information. It helps me make better decisions for the kids and their families. The director, Margie Jordan, is here. She does a wonderful job. We have a large number of CASAs who are very involved in our cases, and I want to thank the board for its support, the CASA program for support of the courts over the years. Been very collaborative and very innovative, and it's helped our jobs to go very much better. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We'll move on now to the report of the standing committees, and first is the Executive Committee Vice Chair Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The executive has a couple items here for action today. The first one is 7A, 1A, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the County of McLean and Town of Normal supporting expansion of the Town of Normal's Uptown TIF District, and I so move.
Motion by Member Solner, second by Member Selzer. Comments or questions? Member Casely.
I have a couple of Harris amendments to propose to this agreement. And the first one is on page 137 in paragraph 1. The first line, I'd like to change the word between to among. And at the request of the town, on page 138, paragraph 4, change the word reimburse to pay. And I move that.
Member Casely and I discussed this. As long as there's consensus, we'll direct staff to make those changes. Otherwise, we'll need to amend with the motion. Is there any dissent? If not, then we'll. Okay with that?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Baird.
Yeah, I want to just provide a comment. I'm going to say I'm intending to vote for this, but with reluctance. TIF districts have been used since the 50s. A number of states and municipalities have gotten away from their use. California, Iowa, Minnesota, and even in Illinois, the use in many municipalities has started to be curtailed. A comprehensive study in Illinois, completed in 1999, found that TIF districts were associated with lower overall economic growth for a municipality that employed them versus one that did not employ them. The Lincoln Institute of Land Policy has written extensively about this. It does not this is something that, when I think of myself as a Bloomington resident and as a resident of the cities, I see municipalities competing against each other, cannibalizing each other's tax base. And as our speakers today said, in many cases, it's competing for retail, things like retail, apartments, those types of businesses, which the argument of the TIF is a but for. This development won't happen but for the TIF. I generally disagree with that, and as Normal is not blighted. So in general, I would hope that our friends in Illinois, and I would also will petition my alderman in Bloomington, and ask that those in Normal, that we start to get away from this form of tax incentive as a way to try to bring growth to our community. It has proven to be, in general, ineffective. That being said, the agreement put forth today is as advantageous of an agreement as we could expect. It returns the majority of this area to the rules in 2026. So the fact that Normal has already acted on this, we would be at a a potential poor financial place if we reject today. So I will support, but at the same time request that our local leaders start to get away from this type of incentive as we move forward and look toward better policies for our residents.
Okay, thank you, Member Beard. Member Robustelli.
So I just have some questions because I think, been a lot of information circulating that may not be completely consistent with the item that's before us, but I want to make sure that I have the information correct before I cast my vote for this particular agreement. So this may be a question for the State's Attorney's Office, but I'm looking at page 137 and page 143. 137 is the actual detailed agreement text, the first page, and 143 is the map that shows what is the Uptown TIF development parcels. So if I understand this agreement correctly, this agreement would provide support for the Town of Normal's petition to extend the TIF district, the entire Uptown Normal TIF boundary. But after the term of this TIF expires, so December 31st, 2026, from that day forward, all areas outside of what is being called the Uptown TIF development parcels, which are the parcels north of Uptown Circle that are currently undeveloped, those would be the only parcels that would be outside of the surplus clause in this, meaning that if anything was developed on the south side of the tracks or anywhere else in the TIF, the county would be entitled to the surplus that was drawn from that development. Do I have that correct in terms of this agreement?
That's my understanding as well. Member
And
Robustelli.
I'm just, I mean, what it says here is, it says pretty explicitly that development parcel is and surplus parcel, and it shows sort of the differential areas. And so I just want to make sure I understand we're talking about a very specific area in terms of what the county would be incentivizing, moving beyond the term of this TIF. And I just want to make sure I understand.
Our conversation also was whether the appropriate procedure for asking the legal question at the meeting was one of the other issues that we were talking about here. But that is our understanding of it.
Okay. It seems like a question I would hope you'd be able to answer, given it's
Yes.
explicit in here. Thank you.
Could have answered that earlier also.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Cavallini.
Yes, I have a question. I'm just curious. I don't recall, living in Lexington, I know that we have a TIF district, and there has always been a little controversy about it in terms of how effective it's been. We've made loans, we've given grants to businesses. Some have profited from that, some have not. The city has not always received its investment back. By not approving this, we're not vetoing this agreement that Normal has. I guess what I'm confused about is, I'm just thinking in terms of Lexington, I don't recall them going before the county to get the county's blessing for a TIF district. Is this something new?
Mr. Watson will answer that question.
A municipality is not required to come before the county to request authorization for a TIF district. This is an intergovernmental agreement that the town has proposed to address those parcels that have already been developed, and ask for the county board's support for an extension request of that TIF district, which would go to the state legislature. So there has been no change in law. They could establish, a municipality can establish a TIF without coming to the board. This is an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement that provides for, if the TIF is extended, provides for the county and other taxing bodies who enter into the IGA, provides for their receipt of surplus funds, which are associated in this agreement with all previously developed parcels within the current TIF.
Member Schaefer.
Okay, so I have a kind of a follow-up question to what Member Robustelli was asking, and I talked for a few minutes before the meeting with the attorney, so this might be another legal kind of question. But on number 5.2, it says that this IGA in no way prohibits or limits the town from entering into future TIF redevelopment agreements with respect to the Uptown TIF District or Uptown redevelopment plan, so long as the town meets its obligations under number 3. Which then, that is basically saying that it's going to give us the surplus parcels back, yet then they're also saying that we can still create another TIF district in the Uptown TIF District? That didn't make any sense to me, and that was the clarification that I don't have.
I can call.
With the board's consent, I'd have Brian Day come up and speak about that, if he's willing.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Would you please come up to the podium? Thank you for joining us all today, all representatives from the council and staff from Town of Normal.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Brian Day, Corporation Counsel for the Town of Normal. Section 5.2 isn't about establishing any new TIFs. It's about, when we talk about redevelopment agreements, those would be agreements between the town and a redeveloper who is doing something within the TIF. So say we wanted to give some sort of extra incentive to somebody who's located in the TIF or change an incentive arrangement that we have, we could do that with a developer within the TIF. As long as we're still, though, having to pay out the full 100% surplus. So that wouldn't, any change in a redevelopment agreement or any new redevelopment agreement would come out of something else other than the TIF surplus that was going to the taxing bodies.
Questions for Mr. Day? Member Robustelli.
I'd just like to ask the same question I asked for you, just in terms of your perspective of this agreement, just to make sure I am fully understanding the scope of what is considered the Uptown TIF development boundary. Anything that is developed outside of the Uptown TIF development parcels that are identified on page 143, after this agreement is in place, when the TIF would have naturally expired, the surplus revenue that is generated from that development would still be paid out to the county.
That's correct.
Okay.
Are there further questions? Member Gordon. I'm sorry. Member Wendt, I'm sorry. I keep missing you back there. Sorry, you're next.
Yeah, I want a roll call vote. And philosophically, I'm against all TIFs because they really affect the adjoining property owners and decrease their value, increase the value of the property within the TIF. So I would like a roll call vote on this.
Thank you. We'll have further questions and discussion, and then we'll have a roll call vote without objection. Any objection to a roll call vote since it was mentioned on the floor? If none, then we will do it at that time. Member Gordon, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I first learned of this agreement, my first reaction really focused on the duration of it, the length of it. Since that time, I have heard other questions raised, other issues, other concerns expressed, and what I've come back around to is the duration. From here to 2026 isn't very long, 8 years. Another 12 years past that, in one fell swoop, strikes me as perhaps making some assumptions about what's going to be going on in that time economically and in fiscal terms as far as local governments, the town, the county. So that I'm going to end up voting against this principally because I think extending it to the max in one step maybe overlooking some possible obstacles or some possible soft spots that might occur. I would prefer to see this in a shorter duration. I'm not going to propose an amendment to it. I'm going to take it as it is, and I'm going to oppose it on that ground.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When this item appeared before the exec committee, I had one question in regards to this issue, and that was, were there any single-family homes involved? And I think we always need to be cognizant of families being displaced, and the answer was no, and that satisfied me. I think a recent article in the Panagraph says you were going to have another business leave downtown Bloomington, creating, I don't know, probably up to 9 or 10 vacant buildings we have. If you look to the north, and Normal continues to be progressive, and we're always looking to bring business into McLean County. Normal happens to be a part of McLean County. And I think what they're doing out there is very commendable, and I certainly urge this board to support this.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Woolrab.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a resident of Normal, and of course I'm primarily here as a McLean County board member, but as a resident of Normal, I'm going to say that I've been very proud of what's gone on down in uptown Normal, and I love to go there, and it's economically, it has been completely revised. And so I'm questioning with this the viability of this as an extension of a TIF district, in that TIF districts are primarily for blighted areas, and I have some wording that I could read and quote about that, but I'm not going to bore everybody with it. However, even on page 136, one of the options that have been discussed, item number two on the top says, one of the options would be to let the original TIF continue into 2026, and then in 2018 carve out undeveloped parcels and create a new separate TIF to address only those parcels. And on the bottom, there's a rejoinder to that saying that's not a viable solution. The town is concerned that creating a new TIF for this affected area of uptown may be challenging due to the blight requirements associated with a TIF. So to me, I think uptown Normal really has gone beyond, and we're grateful for that, gone beyond being a blighted area, and I just don't see how this applies. I'm concerned about the length of time, just as Member Gordon is, and I'm going to be voting no on this.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Selzer.
Mr. Chairman, when we moved here from Chicago in 1985, we would come to downtown Bloomington and go to Kaufman's Bakery, and we'd go to the flower shop, and I'd go get a suit, and we'd pick up a paper at the newsstand, and we would then maybe stop because the kids wanted to go to Abe's, which was a stone parking lot at a kind of weird place in the middle of a quasi-semicircle, and I think the garlic press might have been open then. We didn't go to Normal for any reason. It was terrible. And today, because of the foresight of Normal and because of our trust in the leaders of that community, starting back in 2000 when Mayor Harmon started eliminating debt and the planning started 18 years ago for what we have today in Uptown, I believe more than anything that the officials in the town of Normal have earned our trust, that they know what they're doing and why they're doing. This is one tool within the development bucket. Quite honestly, when we hear from some people, no matter what is done for economic development is challenged, and they said, people should just do this. Well, I think we have living proof, north and south, of when you just let stuff continue to happen and discuss it versus take action. So I'm going to fully support this. They haven't missed a step yet, and I do commend them for what they're doing, and I think they've earned that trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Member Soldner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the fact that the town has come to us and volunteered to enter into this intergovernmental agreement, along with volunteered to make some of the surplus payments, shows that they are willing to work with us and they're willing to do things that aren't required. And again, I realize that this is supposed to be for a blighted area, but back downtown Normal is a lot different now than it was in 2003 when this was started. So I'm going to be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be voting along with Member Woolrab and Member Gordon. I agree with their analysis. It's not the TIF district so much that I have the problem with, it's the amount of time that's involved on this particular TIF district. So I just wanted to explain my vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Beard.
Could I ask if the board rejects this IGA, what would be the next steps for the county or in general?
I'll have to refer to staff because I'm not sure what the process would be.
If the board rejects this agreement, we would not be a party to the intergovernmental agreement. And then obviously it would be up to the town, depending upon the partners that they engage with, to go to the state legislature and ask for support of the extension of the TIF.
You all understand that that has to be done as part of the TIF, the awarding of the extension of the TIF district as well. I have one question. I just like to point it kind of for clarification. Constituents from my district in Normal ask the question about parking quite often when we're talking about this area. I'm sure that's been addressed, and I don't really know the code for parking. I know many of the building projects have been apartments. I wouldn't call those single-family residents, but apartment buildings are for college students, and I'm sure that's been addressed. Is there anything you would like to talk or tell us about that you've considered on that? And it depends on the type of project that's put in there as well. I know one area was north of Mulberry, north of College, between College and Mulberry, which is city-owned property as it is now. That's correct. And then the other area is also, but it is parking at this time. Is there anyone who would like to respond to that? Member Day, would you like to? Would you like to represent your town?
In terms of general parking, throughout the whole TIF, part of it's going to depend on exactly how these parcels redevelop. There'll be certain agreements. We're talking in initial stages with redevelopers on various ways that the property will be redeveloped. We haven't, obviously, we're not to the point where we can come to specifics with them yet because there's still the question of the TIF extension. Certainly, we've kept in mind parking issues with the various parking garages that we've put in, and we look carefully before any development in the town just to make sure we've got required parking that'll suit the needs.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time? Member Schaefer.
Could I ask Mr. Wasson to continue the answer on that, if we do not approve this, are then we not part of getting the surplus parcels money, or how does that work?
That would be correct, ma'am. If the county does not enter into this intergovernmental agreement and then the TIF is extended by the state legislature, we would not receive the surplus funds for the entire length of the TIF, including the extension.
Thank you. Member Casely?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the Executive Committee meeting, I inquired about the geographic scope. Everybody seems to be concerned about the length of time. I'm somewhat concerned about the geographic scope of this TIF district, particularly as it relates to the area which lies south of the center line of Phoenix Avenue extended. And the town has agreed that they would take a look at that and determine whether that could be eliminated from the TIF district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If none, there's been a call for a roll call vote. At this time, we will take that vote. A yes vote is to approve item 7A1A, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement between McLean County and Town of Normal supporting expansion of the Town of Normal's Uptown TIF district. And we'll have a clerk call the roll at this time.
Randall Martin.
Yes.
Catherine Metzger.
No.
Scott Murphy.
Yes.
Eric Rankin.
Yes.
Carlo Robustelli. Susan Schaefer.
Yes.
Brian Scrichlow.
No.
Paul Segabiano.
Yes.
David Seltzer.
Yes.
James Solner.
Yes.
George Wendt.
No.
Lori Walrab.
No.
Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard.
Yes.
William Casey.
Yes.
Don Cavallini.
No.
Chuck Erickson.
No.
Georgia Gordon.
No.
John McIntyre.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 noes. 12-7.
12 yeses, 7 noes, the motion's carried. We'll move on, Member Holner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is 7A1B, request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board setting the salaries of the members of the McLean County Board. It comes to the County Administrator's Office, and I so move.
Motion by Member Solner, second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only think that it should be pointed out, just for the sake of what's in there, is that we're not making any changes to the salary as I read it. I mean, the county board members are voluntarily agreeing not to take a pay increase. So I think that should be pointed out.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
That's all we have for action items. There are numerous reports, and our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes. I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll go on to item B, Land Use and Development Committee Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our items were on the consent agenda, so we have no items for action.
Thank you, sir. We'll go on to item C, Property Committee Chairman Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Property Committee brings no items for actions this morning. However, we did have a request for item, I think it's E2A, and what is the question?
We need to have a motion on the floor. Have a motion on the floor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I would so move for approval.
Okay. Does everybody see where we are? Item E.
2A.
E2A?
Yes.
As well. Okay. Comments? We have a motion, second by Member Cavallini. Is there comments or questions, Member Went?
I want a roll call vote on this. I will be voting no against it. It seems to me that we have a nursing home that's on the verge of losing another $2 million this year, according to the auditor. The fact of spending any money on that nursing home, when instead what we should be looking at is getting out of the nursing home business. And as I have told many of the board members, the private sector has enough beds available. In fact, they have 165 beds available, 135 that are certified for Medicaid. And so the private sector could absorb all the people that we have in our nursing home at this time. And it's an opportune time to do this, because if the private sector nursing homes then take on the 100 residents that we have, they'll be at close to 90% of capacity. And it's my understanding that at the point in time when any business gets anywhere from 90 to 95% of its capacity, they look for the idea of expanding. And this would actually help the private sector expand here in our county. We're very lucky that we have that many beds available for this type of care. So I will be voting no on any improvements right now for our nursing home. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this item came before the Property Committee, and prior to coming to the Property Committee, I had a discussion with our administrator, Mr. Watson, and certainly my questions were answered by Mr. Watson, and as well as Property Committee. So the Property Committee approved this after some discussion. It should be understood, and I think the full board does understand, there are 3 committees involved in anything that's going to take place out there in the renovation and recommendation for the nursing home. It's the Property Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Health Committee. In our 2018 budget, there was $25,000 allocated for renovations of that nursing home. Most of this stuff is going to be modular system in the nursing home stations, and some revisions in the private. So after the explanation from the administrator and to the property committee, I'm going to move for approval of this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Kaisley.
It should be pointed out that the juvenile detention center does not have a kitchen, and the food that is eaten by the detainees comes from the kitchen at the McLean County Nursing Home, and if we were to close it, that would bring on additional expenditures. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Schaefer.
As Chair of the Health Committee, this has been in the nursing home's budget for the last several years, and it's to improve the nurses' station, so it's something that we just are now getting to doing.
Thank you very much. Next comment, Member Erickson.
Yeah, maybe Member Schaefer or County Administration can answer this question for me. I know when we passed the initial resolution, we said there was $50,000 or so set aside to go forward with that.
That's
Is
correct.
that part of that 50,000 or is that a different budget item there?
As
Is
I
that already
understand it, it's
something?
part of the 50,000.
That is
was
part of it.
Originally approved in our original budget last year.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? It's been requested a roll call vote. Are there any objectors? If not, then we're looking at item E2A, request approval of a resolution of the County Board of the County of McLean directing staff to make certain physical changes to the McLean County Nursing Home. And a yes vote is to support the resolutions as stated in your packet. No vote is to deny it. Clerk, please call the roll. Chairman will vote.
Randall Martin.
Yes.
Catherine Metzger.
Yes.
Scott Murphy.
Yes.
Eric Rankin.
Yes.
Carla Robustelli.
Yes.
Susan Schaefer.
Yes.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Yes.
Paul Segabiano.
Yes.
David Seltzer.
Yes.
James Solner.
Yes.
George Wendt. Lori Wolrab. Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard.
Yes.
William Kaisley.
Yes.
Don Cavallini. Chuck Erickson.
Yes.
George Gordon.
Yes.
John McIntyre.
Yes.
Okay. 18 to 1.
18 yes votes, 1 no vote. The motion has carried. Thank you, Member Segoviano. Anything else for the Property Committee?
We have no further information or action items, and our unapproved minutes can be found on pages 18 and 20.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Justice Committee Chair, Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings no items for action this morning to the County Board. Our information can be found in the unapproved minutes, pages 21 through 24, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the report of the Finance Committee Chair, Member Selzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item we bring for action is request approval of a resolution amending the full-time equivalent position resolution for 2018 out of the Nursing Home Fund 0401, and I would move that.
Motion by Member Selzer, second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. I'm sorry, one recorded, no vote. Motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item goes hand in hand with that. Item E1B, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance to the Nursing Home Fund 0401, and I would move that.
Motion by Member Selzer, second by Member Wolrab. Comments or questions? This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have one. Any other recorded dissenting votes? Motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item we bring is request approval of a resolution establishing the budget policy for fiscal year 2019, and I would move that.
Motion by Member Selzer, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
The next item is request approval of Schedule A, calendar of preparation for the fiscal year 2019 budget, 5-year capital improvement budget, and the recommended 3-year budget, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Cavallini. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
Okay, the next item is request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the county clerk, county treasurer, and the sheriff. And I would note that those 3 positions are up for reelection and have to be set by 180 days prior to the election. So that has to have action taken on it today, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Murphy. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
The next item is request for approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the circuit clerk, auditor, and coroner, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? Member Erickson.
I just want to make sure I explain what I'm doing here. I would like to make a motion to amend the auditor's portion of that down to $10,000, not to $10,000 salary, to reduce the salary $10,000, okay? I mean, I want to make sure I'm clear on that. I want to make sure I make that motion here. Bill's giving me a look as like, what am I talking about? Let's just, staff recommended 100, 324 in 2021, subtract 10. Okay, staff recommended in 2022, 100, 324, subtract 10. Staff recommended in 2023, 101, 828, subtract 10. And 2024, 103, 356. That's what staff's recommendation was for the auditor, subtract 10. Yeah, I just want to make that, that's what you wanted me to do, I think. You wanted me to clarify that.
That's what was clarified in our.
I'm trying to help.
Okay,
I'm trying to help here. I mean, can I address the motion now, or should I wait for a second?
Well, you need to have a second.
All right.
Do we have a second? Member Nguyen. Second by Member Nguyen. This is a motion to amend.
All right, thank you. Can I? Yeah, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week at the Executive Committee meeting, we had a very civil, respectful, and friendly discussion, I thought, regarding this matter. No one was questioning anyone's sincerity, the size of their heart, or questioning anyone's motives. When you talk about salary, sometimes it gets very personal, and I didn't think it became that way at exec. And so I know it's possible to keep this discussion civil, so I hope that we can keep this discussion civil. I certainly hope that we can. I'm just going to say respectfully, I would disagree with the committee's recommendation of going from 100, 324 to 75, 324. That's a $25,000 cut. From going 100, 324 to 75, 324, that's a $25,000 cut. From going from 101, 828 to 76, 453, that's a $25,000 cut. And going from 103, 356 to 77, 600 is a $25,000 cut. I think that's too much for the office. I only want to say here, Mr. Chairman, that in regards to this particular ordinance, it also addresses the coroner's salary and the circuit clerk's salary. So I would like to address those separately at some point. I don't know if this is the right spot to do that. If it's not the right spot, I'll wait till this motion is voted on, and then I'll address the coroners and the, this is the time?
Well,
I don't know, you tell
We can do it
me.
either way. We're going to, if we vote to amend this, we're going to go back and vote on it. So I'm going to recommend you address it.
Address it
after we go
now?
back to the
Okay.
No, address it at the original motion. Let's keep our thoughts focused right now on the auditors.
Yeah, you want me to
$10,000.
stick to the auditor right
To
now?
amendment, yes, please.
Okay, I will, I'm asking.
Okay, yeah.
All right, and come back and address that
Yes.
later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Point of order, though. I mean, we're taking this as a group. So we're amending we're not just making an amendment to a specific, just to the auditor. We're talking about all three of these. This is one line item.
We're talking about amending just to the auditor. Although the resolution's for all three. That's why I
Correct,
wanted
but
to wait and go back to the original resolution to vote on it.
The amendment's on the auditor, but we're talking about it as a group. So that's why I'm saying, I think that the conversation about all of them is appropriate in this situation.
I feel it's appropriate after we go back to the original resolution that when we're voting on it as a group. It can be done either way. I just thought it would be better for us to focus our attention on this one correction, since that's what the amendment talked about, and then we'll come back to it. Okay. Any comments about that? Okay, let's go on. Member Erickson, any other comments? As I understand then, the motion is to amend, and let me clarify so we all know, and add $10,000 back from what came out of the.
No, the motion is staff's original recommendations. I'm taking that number.
We're talking
and
about this
subtracting
came
10.
out of the committee, not staff's original recommendation.
I understand that, but I'm using staff's initial recommendations and saying I want to subtract 10 and make that my motion.
Okay,
So whatever 324 minus 10 is my substitute motion.
okay, what we will do then, and I'll have Mr. Knapp read back, as we did in executive committee, the exact figures so everyone will know what they're voting on. If you'd like to record these, and this is pertaining the amendment only to the auditor at this time, and then we'll come back and discuss the whole resolution as a group, okay?
I believe the motion would set the salaries for January 1 through December 31 of 2020 at $90,324, January 1 through December 31 of 2022 at the same $90,324, January 1 through December 31 of 2023 at $91,828, and January 1 through December 31 of 2024 at $93,356.
That's my motion.
All right, thank you very much. Does everybody have those figures? This is a motion to amend the auditor's only salary as part of the original resolution. Any more comments or questions? Member Segoviano.
My only question would be that this came out of finance originally, and I'd like to have the chairman just give us feelings of what took place in finance committee and what was their reaction to your recommendation.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Thank you. We invited all the elected officials to come and speak, countywide elected officials to speak about their scope of work, roles and responsibilities and so forth. And the overall consensus, while the number had some question from various members, the overall consensus was in the auditor's case, this job is much less full-time than it had been in the past, and it had a lot to do with the number of staff that were reporting to her that have since then staff and function transferred over to the treasurer's responsibility, so that really the treasurer has a department of finance, if you will, that she oversees all of that. So there was general consensus that the auditor's salary was set too high for the roles and responsibilities that that position had.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Member Robustelli.
So I read through the minutes from the meetings, and I've been trying to follow this to the best of my ability, and I just want to share kind of my thinking at this point in terms of where I'm at with the specific motion to reduce the auditor's salary. Since I've been on this board, and as far back as I can remember, I mean, at least talking with others, we have never considered the salaries of the countywide elected officials who were not up for election in the preceding year. And the reason for that, and I think where this was born out of, and I think legitimately, because we had quite a debate several years ago when we were setting the salary increases for these particular offices, was because there was a need for an evaluation to look at the automatic increases that were set in the prior 2 years ago when we were thinking about these three offices. And so I think the precedent that was set there was a good one. We set salaries for the terms of the upcoming office to avoid looking like we are changing the salary for an individual. Instead, we're focusing on the office. And I have thought that that practice was compelling, that that practice was important for us. It at least gave the impression, and I'm not suggesting that there's motives beyond, that they're questioning anybody's motives, but I liked that practice. I thought that there was a principled reason for doing it, and I think that was something that ensured that the public and all those involved were treated fairly, that this body evaluated salaries for the terms of the offices for the people that would be elected, not necessarily the people that are in it. So my first concern is the precedent that this sets. It's very concerning to me to, in sort of the middle of a fiscal year, decide, okay, we're just going to lump everyone in together. And then I've heard the compelling arguments that this office has changed. In our last budget cycle, we did make changes. We moved staff out, accounts payable are now in the treasurer's office, and I take that. I think that that's extremely a legitimate point, and some of the functions were transferred. The challenge I have in thinking about this was my understanding is that the auditor did not participate in the committee discussions, and then the auditor was denied the right to participate in the executive committee discussions. And so I haven't heard from the auditor. Neither has the public heard from the auditor. The reason that was given just now by the chairman of the Finance Committee was documented verbally, but in what we have before us, there is no memorandum, rationale, nothing that the public could review in the future. And so I'm uncomfortable making a change like this. Now, we don't have to make the change. We're not obligated, if I understand, by the 180-day rule for these three offices. And I think it would be prudent to take more time with this, do a proper appropriate analysis with some supporting documentation that is in our packet that the public could review with some feedback from the auditor, and then make a decision on this, as opposed to sort of throwing these numbers out, which, again, I'm not questioning anybody's motives. I'm just, should it be 25,000? Should it be 12,500? Should it be 10,000? I don't know. And I don't know what the basis is for this decision, and I'm not sure how I'd explain why we're making this salary reduction at this amount. I can explain the overall justification that's been given today, but why 10,000 or why 25,000? I think we should be able to explain that. I think we should be able to articulate that very clearly.
Other comments, Member Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'm willing to, if that's a motion to table, I'm willing to consider. I don't know if you're making a motion. I do share your concern that the auditor was not allowed to address the executive committee, and I think that the auditor, we can go back to the finance and say she was invited and didn't show up, but still you got to give her a chance to address the issue. I just think that's fair. You got to give her a chance to address the issue. So if you're making a motion to table, I'll withdraw my motion, and if that's
There was
what
no
you're
motion
doing.
to table made by Member Rostelli.
No, there wasn't, but I would make a motion to send it back to finance for what I'm asking for. I think this is insufficient to make the decision.
All right, now we have two motions. One of them is an amendment on the number of the salaries for the auditors, numbers as Member Erickson proposed. There is now a motion to move to send this particular item, that's why I want to discuss it individually, back to finance. Is there a second? Second by Member Wendt. So we have two amendments here on the floor at this time. So now we want to have any discussion for a motion. Should this be not to table, but for a date certain, to go back to the original? Send it back to finance, period. Not table. Date back.
Point of order, once again, sorry, here's the deal. On the point of order, what I had said before is we are talking, these were originally on it as a whole, three positions. If in fact you believe in what Member Robustelli just said, then it should extend to the other two positions as well. Then it should be, the entire line should be referred back to committee rather than just the auditors. If in fact you believe that
That's what I
we don't have to do anything from 100.
Would you like to restate your amendment then?
Yeah, when Member Erickson withdrew his motion, my intention is to send the entire ordinance back. The three offices, because it's the same rationale. Why are we making a decision?
Let's say,
At this point in time, we don't need to make the decision at this point in
Hang
time.
on. Let's have some order. Just hang on for just a second here, because we're confusing issues again, as we have done in the past, first of all. And so let's deal with this one thing at a time here as well. Motion to send back to finance this whole resolution as listed. Is that correct, Member Rostelli?
The ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the circuit clerk, auditor, and coroner.
Yes. Thank you, and there is a second. There is a motion and a second for that. We'll have discussion, and then we'll take a vote on that, then we'll come back to the original amendment if necessary. Thank you. Member Woolrab.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for whatever reason, during our Finance Committee meeting, the question of whether this was appropriate to bring up at this point in time didn't come up. It didn't come up until executive session. I believe it was Judge Casely made the point in executive that, we don't have to set these salaries now. Why are we doing it? And I think I'm amenable to that point of view. And so I'm just kind of questioning why, if it were to come back to finance, what we would be doing with it there. I think we ought to do the research and to look into what the salaries specifically of the auditor, but while we're doing it, we might as well research the others as well. But I would ask Member Robustella if he really thinks it makes sense at this point to send it back to finance or just take it off the table at this point.
Well, I believe you want a motion, and there is a second by Member Wendt to send this back to Finance Committee, which will be discussed next month, so there's no problem about date certain on it as well. And there has been a motion, there's been a request for a roll call vote for this. Any other last discussions on this? Member Schaefer.
I had said this at exec, and what I find advantageous about setting them today is that it's very, very clear that all 6 of them, where they're at in the salary, because every 2 years, and we're trying to figure out, okay, now what one's this one, what one's this one, if we're trying to make them somewhat equitable in some of those cases. It also then shows that we have the intention of not increasing salaries for those that are going to be up in 2020, so that the auditor, the coroner, and the circuit clerk, so that we're, not increasing their salaries, just like we are not getting salary increases for the next 4 years or 2 years, whatever it is. And finally, I lost it. There were 3 things.
Well, that's okay. To the club, we've had some confusing areas at the same time. We're,
Final one.
She's one of our younger members.
any other discussion? Member Selzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I don't disagree with what anybody said, but I want to make it perfectly clear that the auditor is the only person in the last 5 or 6 months who will not come to the Oversight Committee and answer questions. So to imply for even a second, or even just to throw it out there, that she did not have a chance to speak, and then to be given a chance at executive to bypass her Oversight Committee is just wrong. Because then you ought to do that for every elected official and let them just come to exec and forget about oversight committees. So I just felt very strongly about that, and I think that her invitation to come and speak has always been there. And quite honestly, if we want to discuss all this in the public sector, this isn't personal at all. It is 100% about business. So the current auditor, though, the behavior of the individual in that office and the amount of time they spend performing the function of that office must be taken into account as to whether or not this is a full-time position or a part-time position. So, all people have to do is look at what is in the public space to find out why the Finance Committee has a concern. And it's not just the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Let's limit our discussion now to the motion to send back to Finance. Member Rankin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being germane to the question, sending it back to Finance, it was a robust discussion when we had it beforehand. And the question really did surface as to how do we set these numbers? I mean, the administration did a good job of providing us with numbers. Don gave us plenty of information about what other auditors are doing, but it ends up becoming a little bit more philosophical. How do we evaluate? And one of the questions that we had at the committee was, should it be equitable? Right? So we've traditionally tried to keep our offices as being equitable, but you have a circuit clerk who is who is managing 70 people, and you have an auditor who is managing one. So that becomes the question. If we send it back, I think we need more direction from this board as to what they're actually looking for us to do, or are you looking for us just to not just send it back to finance, but then kill it and wait for 2 years down the road to come back to this? That's where I think you've got to give us just a little bit more direction. And Member Selzer and I, this is one of those weird situations where we agree, but we disagree in how we get there. When we say things like, she doesn't show up to meetings, which is factually true, then that part does make it sound like it's the person and not the office. I'm all about the office. I mean, I'm all in favor of just eliminating the office altogether, not eliminating the person. And I think I've been consistent upon that for quite some time. I go to the George Wendt School of Consistency. But so I think that's got to be some sort of direction that we have for the committee is, what do you actually want us to do with this? Do we send it back to committee and then sit on it? Or do you really want to have research and come forward again in another month? And do we come right back to this situation again where everybody says, well, we're not going to vote on it because we don't need to do that?
I'm not sure how much direction we can give without it going back to finance. I understand your suggestion. Anyone else have discussion on this at this time? Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support sending it back to Finance for the sole reason that it's another opportunity for Finance to invite the auditor to appear and to state her case, state her position, and to engage in a conversation with the members of the Finance Committee so that there can be more of a record developed upon which the full board can rely as we make our decision when it comes back.
Thank you. I want to remind you that has been done once, and also in exec as well. So we've gone through this process once, but if we start over, that'll be up to our board. Member Murphy.
This is one of those very, very rare times where Member Rankin and I agree. And here again, we are funding the position because the position has been cut to where we've cut part of their department out. We have cut 75% of the people that elected official oversees. So it is not a personal thing saying we are trying to get to the auditor. We are making the position pay for what it does. The other part of this as to why I believe we need to do this now is that we owe it to the auditor and to other candidates who might seek that position to know what they're going to get paid. We have some very expensive and hotly contested primaries. The candidates put a lot of time and treasure into getting the nomination. And then all of a sudden, they find out that the salary is now going to be cut 25% after they've done all that. And I believe we owe it to them to let them know what they're going to be paid if we're going to make that significant of a change to that office.
Sorry, we have a motion on the floor to send item E1F, to send back to the Finance Committee for further addressing and discussion. I'll allow a little more discussion, and then let's finish up and vote on this. Thank you. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Member Gordon. I think she should have listen, you can sit here and say that, she should have been here, she should have done this, should have, could have, would have. But I mean, the issue is the position, and it's not the person. And if the issue is truly the position, then she ought to be allowed to come before Finance. And I think she'll come because she came before exec. And she'll be willing to discuss what her position, whether it merits the amount of money that staff recommended. I think she should be allowed to do that. In regards to Member Murphy's comments, I would respectfully disagree. We're only talking about 1 or 2 months, and there's no candidate out there right now deciding whether they're going to run for it or not. They'll probably decide next fall or next year. And so 1 or 2 months isn't going to put any candidate at any prejudice in regards to what we're doing. I just think it's fair to the position to hear from the occupant of the position about what her thoughts are. So that's my reasoning. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion on the floor to send item E1F back to the Finance Committee for further consideration. Member Cavallini?
I guess I'm troubled by the fact that I keep hearing the term, "we've invited her." Don't we have the authority to say, you will show up before this committee and talk to us?
No. Thank you. I'm ready for the question. Was there a roll call vote on this at this time? Well, let's do a roll call vote anyway. Clerk. The question is, do we send back item E1F, request approval of an ordinance, the McLean County Board establishing an annual salary of the circuit clerk, auditor, and coroner, back to Finance Committee for further consideration? A yes sends it back.
Randall Martin,
Yes.
Chairman will vote, by the way.
Catherine Metzger. No. Scott Murphy.
No.
Eric Rankin.
Yes.
Carla Robustelli.
Yes.
Susan Schaefer. No. Ryan Scritchlow.
Yes.
Paul Segabiano.
No.
David Seltzer.
No.
James Solner.
No.
George Wendt.
Yes.
Lori Wolrab.
No.
Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard.
Yes.
William Casely.
No.
Don Cavallini.
Yes.
Chuck Erickson.
Yes.
George Gordon.
Yes.
John McIntyre.
No.
10 sends it back, 9 no. 10 to 9.
10 sends it back to the Finance Committee. The motion has been approved, and we will move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item we bring for action, whoops, I moved over to the wrong committee all of a sudden, is request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing an annual public safety stipend, and I would move that.
Motion by Member Sulzer, second by Member Cavallini. Comments or questions? Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not making a motion. I just want to explain why I'm voting the way I'm voting. The staff initially recommended $10,000. And so I would have to assume that staff had researched it and thought through it and potentially even talked to the sheriff about it, or at least thought that was a fair amount to recommend. So staff recommended 10, the committee changed it to 15. I would support the 10. I'm hesitant to support the 15, but I want to say this. It's not because I don't think the sheriff's an honorable man. He's doing a great job. I think he's a great sheriff. I called him yesterday and I explained all this to him. I think, hey, you're doing a great job. I'm really happy with what you're doing. It's not against you personally. It has nothing to do with you at all. Don't arrest me after the meeting. I think he's a great man. So it has nothing to do with the person. I just feel that. I don't know. Well, I'm gonna get to the 5,000 here, but we're only $5,000 apart. So I'll support 10. I'm not going to support 15. That's my reasoning. I just want the public to know that's why I'm voting the way I'm voting. So.
Thank you. Anybody else want to explain how they're voting? Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I made a substitute motion in exec to increase it to 15,000, and after looking at all the data that was presented to us, our sheriff of the 6-county area ranked number 4. And by adding this $5,000, it moves him up to 3rd place in the 6 counties. Only, I think, is $2,000 above the 4th place sheriff in the 6-county area. It's a matter of it's a safety stipend. It's not on his base salary. And I think that, with all the additional responsibility that's going to be forthcoming to McLean County, he and his staff are highly recommended for the job they do. And this is just a small compensation for very intelligent, adequate, and professional sheriff, and I think we ought to vote for it.
Other comments or questions? Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question just for information. The public safety stipend would take effect for the upcoming term of the McLean County Sheriff. Would we have to renew that stipend each and every time for a 4-year term?
No, sir.
Okay.
Any other comments? Member Rankin?
Let me be clear.
Do you need me off?
Go ahead.
So the stipend would be established for the 4-year term. You would not have the ability to determine annually.
I understood that, thank you.
Okay.
But my question is, would that stipend be in place automatically for succeeding 4-year terms?
No, sir.
Oh.
We would have to adopt it each and every
Yeah,
time
because
for
that
these
is
4-year
it's based
terms.
on comps, it's
That
an
is correct.
equalizer as
Thank you.
well.
Okay, just
Compared to other sheriffs.
I wanted to be sure that was clear and on the record and that I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, Member Rankin?
Just to continue the weird day, my original thinking when we were at finance was I like the idea of the cost savings of the reduction in one position while the moving up in another position. That made me feel more comfortable. The fact that now that has potentially been eliminated makes me even more cautious about the $15,000. So I will make a substitute motion to return the $15,000 to $10,000.
So there's a motion to amend the amount of the public safety stipend to 10,000 as was originally promoted before it was raised to 15 in the committee. Is there a second? Second by Member Erickson. Any other comments or questions at this time about the amendment? Motion as amended. Member Murphy.
McLean County is the largest county in Illinois. We have a sheriff that oversees all of the patrols out through the county. The new jail is not replacing the old jail, it's augmenting the jail, so he's going to have more responsibilities. The mental health part of it makes our jail the biggest mental health or will make our jail the biggest mental health provider in the county. When we fund a position as opposed to funding the person, that position is enormous, and this new jail is making the position even bigger. We need to make sure that we have good people in that applying for the job of sheriff, running for the job of sheriff, because there is no other place that we are as vulnerable to lawsuits as there is with the sheriff's office. The sheriff has enormous responsibilities to our county, and I want to make sure that we have the best one available, and I want to make sure that they are compensated. And if he's only the third most highest paid sheriff in our comparables, they're not the size of our county, and they don't have the new jail that we've got going up. So I think that the 15,000 is more appropriate.
Thank you. Other comments or questions about the motion to amend? Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Member Murphy. We had a pretty good discussion on this during finance, and I agree that the sheriff has, not only does he now have a lot of responsibility, and he'll have more when the mental health part of the jail opens up, but it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the next 4 years. And so I'm looking towards the future probably more than to the present. So I believe 15,000 is appropriate.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Casely.
Well, I have a unique perspective on the safety functions of the sheriff, being the only circuit judge who has been biffed by an inmate in the Law and Justice Center. And I was very happy with the performance of our sheriff, and I was glad that he was on duty, and so I'm appreciative of that, and I'm not the only one. The public defender also took a hit from the same person at the same time, so I know that the public defender appreciates it too.
Thank you. Any other comments? Member Woolrab.
I'll simply say that I was very comfortable with the staff recommendation and their research and the original $10,000. And so it's not, I'm not the person, and I think we are a county. Yes, we are the largest county by geography, but I think the statistics are really based on population size.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
It's been a roll call vote. Are there any objections? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. A yes vote is to approve the amendment moving the salary for the public safety stipend back to $10,000 from 15, as worded in your original resolution. Stipend, I'm sorry. I say salary. Thank you. It's a stipend as well. Any other comments? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. Chairman will vote.
So yes moves it back.
Yes moves it back to 10,000. A no is 15.
Randall Martin,
No.
Catherine Metzger. No. Scott Murphy. No. Eric Rankin. Yes. Carla Robustelli. Yes. Susan Schaefer. No. Ryan Scritchlow.
Yes.
Paul Segabiano.
No.
David Seltzer.
No.
James Solner.
No.
George Wendt. George Wendt.
George is
Gone, okay.
down.
Lori Wolrab. Yes. Josh Barnett.
No.
Jacob Beard.
Yes.
William Casely.
No.
Don Cavallini.
No.
Chuck Erickson.
Yes.
George Gordon.
No.
John McIntyre.
No.
6. I have 6.
We have 12 no, 6 yes, and the motion is defeated. We'll move back to the the amendment, I'm sorry. It's defeated. We'll go back to the original motion. Request approval of an ordinance, McLean County establish an annual public safety stipend with the original figures as in your packet. There has been a motion and a second. Is there any more comments on the original motion? Roll call vote. Any objection? If not, a yes vote is to approve the motion as stated in your packet, the resolution, with the figures that are stated there as well. A no vote is to deny it. Roll call, please.
Randall Martin.
Yes.
Catherine Metzger. Yes. Scott Murphy.
Yes.
Eric Rankin.
Yes.
Carla Robustelli.
Yes.
Susan Schaefer.
Yes.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Yes.
Paul Segabiano.
Yes.
David Seltzer.
Yes.
James Solner.
Yes.
George Wendt. Oops, I'm sorry. Lori Wolrab. Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard. William Casely.
Yes.
Don Cavallini. Chuck Erickson.
Yes.
George Gordon.
Yes.
You voting? John McIntyre.
Yes. 18. Anyway.
Now George.
Mike?
Seltzer.
Thank you. We have one more item to bring for action, and that is request approval of a collective bargaining agreement between McLean County Board and Laborers International Union of North America, local number 362, our METCOM. And you should all have a copy of that in front of you, and I would move that.
There is a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Member Barnett. You have a copy in front of you of the agreement with IUNA?
Yes, they do.
Any discussion? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you. We have no other items to bring for action. We're done.
Thank you, thank you. Let's move on to Transportation Committee. Chair Member Casely.
The Transportation Committee brings no items for action, and our general report is found in the unapproved minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Health Committee Chair Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee has no items for action today. Our unapproved minutes can be found on pages 32 through 36 of the packet.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the County Administrator's report. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing else for the county board this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any other business or communication at this time? If not, I have bills to pay in the amount of $3,649,777.79. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Member Cavallini, second by Member Casely. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Well, you just witnessed maybe one of the longest and largest committee meetings that we've had in the history of the county board for quite some time, like the old days, and I'm happy to say this meeting is adjourned.